2020. Okay, welcome to the 2021-22 Economically Disadvantaged Data Collection webinar for traditional LEAs. Today, we're going to be talking about the decisions that we're trying to make on your behalves for the calculations to be made for the 2022 to 2023 school year. I know that seems like it's a ways off since we're just starting the 2021-22 school year, but just a quick reminder, again, we need to have some sort of data set that we can use to be able to put together your allocations for these federal programs for both the title programs and special education. And with that, as a reminder, for the school year that we are starting, we are using data, or we had to use data that was not as updated as we wanted to. And so we are super excited to be able to find another data set that we'll talk about here in just a minute for the 22-23 allocations that will be more current. All right. Let's make sure I can go through. All right, so let's talk about economically disadvantaged data collections and why we have to do it. So we have several types of federal funds that we must manage, and we also have calculations involved with each of these types of funding sources and very specific federally regulated calculations that we have to do that differ between these programs. But something that is the same between the three programs is the fact that we need some sort of economically disadvantaged data. Or a low income or a poverty count, as many of you may refer to it. So the Title I-A Improving Basic Programs, just an overview, is a federal program that helps students who are most at risk meet the state academic standards and be proficient on those state assessments. Title II-A, Supporting Effective Instructions, is another federal program that's there to increase student achievement, and it really improves our teacher quality and effectiveness. And many of you also have an IDEA Part B program for special education, and that's federal grants that are designed to support LEAs to pay the excess costs of providing special education and the related services to children with disabilities, including children that have those disabilities that have access to the free and appropriate education, or FAPE, as you'll hear it. So these are the three major programs that we're talking about today that have these calculations involved that we need to have some sort of data set for. All right, a little background. On March 20th of 2020, the USDA and the school nutrition programs, or the nutrition services programs, issued national waivers to help support access to these programs for meals while minimizing potential exposure to coronavirus. And then in the fall of 2020, additional waivers were put in place that it eventually got extended through the whole school year last year, as you know. And with these waivers that were in place, the free and reduced lunch applications were not collected. There was no need. A lot of people forgot that those were important and integral to some of the data collections necessary for us to do those allocations. So we recently learned that the USDA did another waiver for the new school year for the 21-22. So as a result, everybody's going to get free meals again, which is great. The national school lunch applications for free and reduced meals will not be available. So with that, we had to make a determination for you guys. When we did calculations this time last year, we began the process, and we were learning that those extensions were going to last through last school year. We decided to use the most reasonable and accurate data that we had, which was the prior year. So that meant the allocations that you have for your programs for this school year was actually based on the 1920s data. And so we really decided we didn't want to use the 1920s data again, because as we know, there's been a lot of movement in our community between our school districts and the enrollment. And so to be able to use the most current enrollment, we really needed another current data set to go with it. And so we are implementing a process change for traditional LEAs to collect for the 22-23 allocation calculations. All right, so let's talk about direct certification. Many of you are familiar with this. So the change to our data collection process for traditional LEAs, and this is data that we're going to use for the allocations for the 2022-23 period, is going to be the use of the direct certification data and a CEP multiplier. So what is direct certification? Well, this is an attempt designed to primarily improve program access and administrative efficiency. So what this is a data set that we can get from the Department of Health and Welfare that uses direct certification information for families that are receiving some sort of a benefit. And what it is it includes direct certification matches to school enrollment records, so that basically you can identify from health and welfare a child that also attends school in your district, and say, hey, normally we would say, make sure these kids get free and reduced lunch, or free or reduced lunch. So most of you already get this data and are very familiar with this data. And the LEAs on your side need to capture students that are eligible for this direct certification at the building level, because it can impact your Title 1A rank and serve in the absence of a student count. But anyway, we just want to kind of go through the program, a little bit of the background on it. If you're not familiar with it, you have more questions, there's additional resources on the school nutrition page, and we can also be of assistance. So let's talk about CEP. That stands for Community Eligibility Provision. And CEP provides an alternative that eliminates the whole need for those household applications. So they're in high poverty LEAs in schools. So if you're not familiar with this, either give us a call or again, see that child nutrition page. There's a whole bunch of other information on this program. But overall, to be eligible, you have to meet a minimum level of identified students for free meals in the prior year or the year prior to implementing this program. And you have to agree to serve these free lunches and free breakfasts, and then to cover any additional with non-federal funds. So if you are CEP, you know your CEP, and if you're not, that might be something to look into. We're just going over what it is in general to help you understand another piece of the data calculation we will be doing. So reimbursement for each LEA or school is based on claiming percentages that are derived from those percentages of identified students. For example, with students that are certified with those free meals through means other than that household application. So overall, just again, this is an overview for you just to understand in general what that process is. And the claiming percentages are established in the first year for the LEA or the school, and they can be used for 4 years. But the important part that we want to lead you to is what this means and equates to on the calculations that we will be doing in the spring. So we have this direct certification information and this CEP program to account for the differences in poverty rates when we are using the free and reduced price meals data and the non-CEP schools and this direct certification piece. We are able to use a multiplier of 1.6. And what that does, it's going to approximate and make up for the population that might be in that reduced count for a school, for a CEP school. So students identifying information, just some good information for you, will be removed from this report. The data is going to be collected on a building level, which is important for the Title 1A rank and serve. The State Department is going to apply that multiplier to, again, capture that population of lower income for the reduced lunch population. And it's still going to be a snapshot eligibility report that we're using. What we typically do is use that in the spring, and there's going to be no change to that due date. It will still be March 18th of the year 2022, so in the spring. And just to give you an idea how this calculation works, because again, we're taking the direct certification numbers, which is going to already give us anyone that might be in that bracket that's identified on some sort of service through Department of Health and Welfare. And we're going to multiply, use that multiplier of 1.6 to capture, again, the population that would maybe be in that reduced price meal range. So an example here of that calculation would be a total enrollment, let's say of 500. Your direct certification count came in at 89. We're going to use that multiplier. Remember, it's 1.6, and that is a federally determined multiplier. So we take our our direct certs, and we're going to multiply it by that factor of 1.6, we get 142.4. Then we divide that by your total enrollment, and that's going to determine a rate of economically disadvantaged students of 28.48%. This is not something that you will be doing. Again, I want to emphasize this is an example of the SDE's calculation. So this is how we will get those numbers to determine that rate for you to go into the calculations that we make when determining those allocations from those federal grants. So let's also talk about data collections used for other purposes, because we know that part of the data you get on those free and reduced lunch applications has been in the past used within some school districts for other purposes. So we want you to know that you can use an income survey data or other internal documents or surveys that you do on a needs basis for other district specific services. Sometimes it's been used to do a discounted sporting fee or extracurricular activity, like maybe band and so on and so forth, or ACT, SAT testing fees. For those purposes, again, you guys are welcome to use some other source on a needs-based, if that's something that is needed. And with that, I'm going to just conclude in general and open it up for any questions that we may have that have come through in the chat.
So we have a question from Kim. I don't know if you folks have seen it, and her question is, have you run numbers from past years to see if the formula is reliable to the number of free and reduced numbers collected through forms? Now, we as a department have not done that, and frankly, that's also an issue of manpower. With, as you know, with all the CARES Act funding, SO 123, plus ARP Homeless, plus Lisa's ARP funding, IDEA ARP funding, we just don't have the manpower. Now, I will say that we have heard from some districts who have tested this, and it's fairly close.
And just remember, by us using this direct certification and the multiplier, we're able to use your most current enrollment, which is, I feel, and both Alex has felt, that will really help because the story has changed. I mean, last year we all saw a lot of movement with some kids going to charters or online this and that they thought maybe would work better for their child as the schools were struggling or starting to implement those new programs for online that maybe parents moved their kids around. Plus we had a lot of movement just in the general populations back and forth. And so we really wanted to be able to tap into what is happening in our schools right now. Where are these kids landed for the school year? We really wanted to use the new enrollment data. So now that we're going to be using this direct cert info with it, we can use current year enrollment and not 1920 enrollment. So again, the calculations for us haven't changed. Mine is very federally dialed in, as are Alex's calculations. It's the same formulas. It's just what data set could we use with the most current information for that piece that's from a low income perspective piece of the calculation. And let's see. So I'm looking at the sample calculation of the 89 direct cert. Alex, do you see that question coming in?
Yes. Hold on a second. Hold on.
We'll have to look at that and get back to you. Because we use the federal example to do this direct certification calculation that we put into the presentation. But basically we'll be doing the calculations. But yeah, let me reach back out to you as far as your question on that, because that is a big difference. And we'll just double check that we use the right calculation from the feds.
So, and I would like to point out too that it's not just a matter of using this data versus that data. It's also a matter of, well, for one, these free and reduced lunch applications are documents that are housed in child nutrition and should only be used for child nutrition purposes. In the past years, we were fortunate enough to, in a sense, piggyback off that data. So data was only collected once, and districts were not put through the mechanism of collecting the same data twice. But these free and reduced lunch applications through child nutrition program cannot be used because USDA, as Lisa mentioned, is providing free lunch for all students again. So from their perspective, there is no need to collect any data because everybody eats for free. So I guess my point is this direct certification option, regardless of what possible consequences it may or may not have, is the best option because you will be faced with the challenge of collecting data if you were to, let's say, try to do, create additional forms and whatnot.
And I just wanted to acknowledge Kim had another response too, that she wasn't really the old and new data, just she wanted to direct it towards overseeing, do we foresee any implications prior to implementing this new system? And, we don't, we have a solid data set that we have access to. We don't have access to the actual data set in the free and reduced lunch National Center. We have it coming from or through the Department of Health and Welfare. And again, the data is scrubbed. We're not going to see student names and none of that data. But basically, we have a good data set. We would not make this decision other than that. And we did hear from some large and smaller districts that they also had felt that this was a solid data set to use. And it was actually came recommended to us by a couple districts. Hey, why don't you try this? At least then we could use our current enrollment. And if we thought there was a better data set to use, we would. So we want to make sure that you guys know ahead of time what we're looking to do in the spring so that you make sure that you have your systems in place and know that you'll be able to use your current enrollment. Let's see, we have a good comment here from Suzanne. Very important that LEAs will continue to do outreach activities and identify students experiencing homelessness. Yes. And yeah, they're talking about the McKinney-Vento identification, and they'll still need to get that information to the child nutrition staff because they're correct. There's a lot more benefits and rights for students that are coded with McKinney-Vento than just free lunch. And again, we're looking here specifically today from an angle of being able to calculate your grant allocations for federal programs and for special education. So everything else is the same as you would to make, like was indicated by Suzanne, to make sure you're still doing that outreach, still identifying students with these other needs to help them get the access that they need to other resources. And I saw, let's see, Kimberly had mentioned calculations for their district. In one building, our percent dropped 40%. So this would be an issue.
So I think that then goes back to making sure your parents, the children who are eligible will direct certify through, the direct certification program. To her question about the percentage for school-wide, nothing else changes. We're not making changes to any of the programmatic, let's say, eligibility requirements. It has merely to do with the data collection. Regarding Landon's comment, will we go back to the old system and lunch is no longer for free for everyone? I will say, let's cross that bridge when we get there. We don't want to, put out any speculations as to what will happen in a year from now. Perhaps we'll return to the prior process. Perhaps the Biden administration will, put forth a law change that all children continue to eat for free. We just don't know. So I don't really want to speculate as to, processes going forward a year or two from now, well, 2 years from now, because we are talking about next year. And that's the other reason why we are putting up these webinars earlier. As Lisa stated, this data collection will take place in March of next year, so about 6 months from now. But this is, a way of giving you a heads up.
And I just wanted to also reach out back, I think it was Kim. Yeah, Kim made a comment that she had seen a 40% drop in one building. If you guys have some solid numbers that you guys could run and are willing to share with both Alex and I, or at least one of us, we are interested in seeing what that looks like. And again, you guys know your numbers, and it says you guys could quickly calculate what does that mean if you used your current data set, right? And what you know from your schools. And seeing that 40% drop in the one building, yeah, that would be an issue. So we're curious because again, we don't have the manpower to have reached out and done analysis all the way across the board for a whole year. But if you guys could send us some numbers and say, hey, this is how I would be impacted. And again, you're not releasing student data. It would be held here at the State Department. We're looking for those percentages to help us with that, to say, hey, this would very negatively impact me this way, or maybe at this school, or this looks like it would be a reasonable set for me. Again, we don't have a lot of options other than to use 1920 enrollment data and free and reduced numbers again. And we're looking also at national trends and what other states are using and doing. And again, this is one of the options that's been presented to us. So with that, that's the decision that we've made at this time, but we do still want to hear from you. We do still want to have that sense of how this may be impactful, to see if there's anything else that we can suggest to help you guys implement, because it is still in the spring, 6 months out. So what else can we do? And if you guys have those ideas, we do want you to reach out and let us know what those could be. Maybe you're that problem solver who can help us and say, hey, this is what would really help those folks that maybe are thinking about that, really being a problem for their district. I just want to make sure we stay on and see if there's any additional. And we did get another comment from, it was Kim, about having a roundtable discussion instead of just the informative webinars. Yeah, I mean, if you guys feel that that would be, something that would be helpful, that would, maybe we could do some sort of a data collection from a few of you guys and then come together for a roundtable. And again, possibly additional ideas from you guys, because at this time, this was our approved data set that we were looking to implement. So if there are some of you that are willing to come together as a roundtable for maybe some sort of a discussion to help us with your perspective and maybe again some solutions, then that could change.
And I second, Lisa, we sure like to get your input, but I will also say that in the absence of other, we would like to hear what you would then suggest as an alternative data collection method, because we did discuss this at length with our respective directors, as well as our child nutrition program. And as we mentioned earlier, some other district folks. And this was the best solution that we came up with. So we're open to other, possibilities, possible data collections. And Mary Grace asked where you get the direct certification data. This is like data that's coming through from health and welfare. So you don't have to do anything with it. In terms of giving us any data, we will get this data through our IT department, and then we will apply that multiplier to the direct certification number, to the count.
In general, though, with that, there's usually someone at your school district that is receiving the direct certification data. So if you do have more questions about that, there are some links on the school nutrition website off the State Department's website. Yeah, and another person said food service in your district is the right person to talk to internally for that information. Because again, that probably comes into them so that they can plug them into their system and make sure that that kiddo would get the free and reduced lunch. And somebody else says they're also tagged somewhere in PowerSchool. So look to see what software you guys are using to see if maybe somebody else has insight on that internally, if you have it in another location like Kim has. But but yeah, I feel like you guys have had some great comments. And again, like was portrayed by Alexandra, is that really we did look at several data sets, and without that free and reduced lunch application, which, you know, parents are motivated to give out that data to be able to have their child qualify maybe for those programs. Without that, it really has limited us on what kinds of data sets we can use. So we're really looking at this as, like she said, the best possible solution at this time, but that doesn't mean there isn't room for improvement. It doesn't mean that there can't be a roundtable discussion. So I'm thinking I'm probably going to reach back out to Kim to see some thoughts there on maybe some other resources that we can draw from, and your expertise, because we're not in your shoes. We're looking to help make sure we can still process those allocations for you with some sort of meaningful data. And just knowing the change in the state of Idaho with enrollment and just general population changes, really want to make sure that we can use current data of some sort.
To Nancy's comment here about a district with a large migrant population could see reduction. And we fully agree with that, but then goes back to liaisons to make sure that they, you know, get their students certified. So there would be some effort of outreach, I guess that's what I'm trying to say, similar to other select categories such as McKinney-Vento and migrant.
That is an interesting
insight. And I'm getting a couple of like private comments here in terms of the roundtable. So if anyone is interested, just send us an email with your district's name and your contact information, and we can collect that information and run it up the chain.
Yeah, and that is huge, because again, you guys are on the front lines. So you guys may have additional insights that we want to recognize. So definitely reach out to us and we will run it up the chain to see about having that secondary discussion and maybe being able to learn a little bit of more insights from you guys and possible other solutions. And, you know, if that's the case and we find that there's something else that we can use, we would definitely turn that around and make sure we notify everybody again as soon as possible so that you guys know the direction to take and where we're coming from, so that we make sure that we're doing the right things throughout the school year. Suzanne just made a comment too about McKinney-Vento and migrant. Yeah. And that may be something that we can talk about at the roundtable about what percentage of schools have all of that data. Where it comes from.
Comment here about the automatic qualifiers that I think we had that on one of the slides, the reference that because of their status, certain populations automatically qualify.
All right, I just want to leave it open for maybe another minute or two. I don't want to leave anybody out who has a comment that they want to make sure that we have recognized here. And then with that, we're going to post a recording of this on our website and the slides. And then we will probably do some sort of a follow-up communication just to make sure if there's anyone that was not able to attend, and if we have any information that will possibly address that roundtable discussion. And we want to thank you guys. We know you guys are busy and many of you guys have started school, or this might be your first week of school. And just again, good luck to all of you guys getting the school year started. And thanks for attending today.
Thank you.